One of the first things you meet as you step out of the university train station and walk towards the grand campus of the University of Birmingham is a monumental bronze figure. Its face split in half, its hands wrestling thick metal wires and a hole blown through its centre. It's a sculpture full of power and full of presence.
This is Faraday, commissioned in 2000 by the university, and what would become Eduardo Paolozzi's last large-scale public work.
Paolozzi's sculpture depicts Michael Faraday, an English scientist from the 19th century who worked in the fields of electrochemistry and electromagnetism. Paolozzi allows those areas to bleed into the form of the sculpture itself, and it creates a form that appears machine-like and robotic.
The kneecaps resemble plug sockets, and nuts and bolts protrude from his feet and ankles. His hands grasp an interlocking series of coiled shapes. If we look at the early maquettes of the statue, we can see Paolozzi experimented with what he wanted the sculpture to hold in his hands. He settled on an interlocking series of coiled shapes, like bolts of lightning, a reference to Faraday's engagement with electromagnetism. This was intended, in part, to echo the way in which Faraday pictured fields of energy visually in his own work. But this isn't the first time Paolozzi has depicted an important scientific figure. Just before Faraday arrived in Birmingham, his sculpture of Isaac Newton was unveiled at the British Library in 1995. Paolozzi combined this pose with his own self-portrait, fusing art with science in one body, and like Faraday, worked in mechanical elements. There is a similar sense of the ambivalent potential of knowledge, expressed in the way it brings about changes, in particular to the body.
The split head is another reminder of the sculpture's fragmented appearance. We're no longer simply looking at a sculpture of a canonical male scientist.
This is instead something that recognises the shifts in learning and education in the early 21st century, particularly the changing demographics of students. The split face here, then, may also be read as a reference to the Roman mythological figure of Janus, looking in two directions, to past and future. This is something Paolozzi had explored in a similar work. Taking its title from another Roman god, Vulcan, this sculpture was originally installed in Central Square, Newcastle in 1999. It's often personified as a blacksmith, but this sculpture speaks to the area's historical, and at this point in the late 90s, waning connection to heavy industry.
So like Vulcan, Faraday grapples with the relationship between the past, present and future in a particular place. As students walk past the sculpture onto campus, there's a sense that learning, thinking and researching is something that can split and unmake you, but also reform you in new ways.
This also links back to anxieties from the recent past. Despite Faraday being several decades removed from the post-war period, the time when Paolozzi developed his wider sculptural practice, it retains and reworks anxieties held then, such as the mechanised, fighting or wounded bodies of the Second World War, as well as the ways in which traditional forms of masculinity, the father and the breadwinner, began to be undermined by the expansion of capitalism.
What brings this all together lies here at the base of the sculpture. This is a poem by T.S.Eliot called The Dry Salvages. It was written during the Second World War, but here it's used to speak directly to the new generations of students walking past this sculpture every day.
It reads, "Fare forward, travellers, not escaping from the past into different lives or into any future, You are not the same people who left that station. Here between the hither and farther shore, while time is withdrawn, consider the future and the past with an equal mind.
This is a piece of public art in an environment rich in learning and change, where individuals experience the kind of unmaking and remaking embodied by Faraday every day. Though it's removed from the post-war period in which Paolozzi first made his name, it retains many of the anxieties and concerns of that moment, but remakes them for the present day. Commissioned and completed towards the end of his life, this was Paolozzi's final public work of art.